Year-round, millions of visitors come to the nation's capital to experience firsthand its celebrated symbols of patriotism. Join us as we make our way around the National Mall area in Washington, D.C., stopping to explore each memorial along the way. The Lincoln Memorial, located on the National Mall opposite the Washington Monument, was designed by New York architect Henry Bacon. The building is constructed primarily of Colorado Ewell marble and Indiana limestone. The 36 columns around the memorial represent the states in the Union at the time of Lincoln's death. Their names are carved in the frieze directly above. The names of the 48 states in the Union when the memorial was completed in 1922 are carved in the exterior attic walls. The words of Lincoln's second inaugural speech, as well as his Gettysburg Address, are inscribed on either side of the interior of the memorial. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The focal point of the memorial, however, is a marble sculpture of Lincoln himself, which stands 19 feet tall and 19 feet wide, and is made up of 28 separate blocks of white Georgia marble. The statue depicts Lincoln as worn and pensive, gazing eastwards down the reflecting pool at the nation's starkest emblem of the Union, the Washington Monument. Beneath his hands, the Roman fasces, symbols of the authority of the Republic, are sculpted in relief on the seat. On the wall behind the statue, visible over the statue's head, is this dedication. In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. Directly across the reflecting pool from the Lincoln Memorial at the west end of the National Mall stands the Washington Monument, a large white-colored obelisk constructed to honor George Washington, the first president of the United States. The monument is among the world's tallest masonry structures, standing over 555 feet in height, and is made of marble, granite, and sandstone. In 1833, the Washington National Monument Society was organized by influential citizens who undertook the building of a great national monument to the memory of Washington at the seat of the federal government. The progress of the society was slow at first. However, by 1847, $87,000, including interest, had been collected by popular subscription. The actual construction of the monument began in 1848, but was not completed until 1884, almost 30 years after the architect's death. This hiatus in construction was due to lack of funds and the intervention of the American Civil War. A difference in the shading of the marble, visible approximately 150 feet up, clearly delineates the initial construction from its resumption in 1876. The top may be reached by elevator or by an iron stairway. Inserted into the interior walls are 188 carved stones presented by individuals, societies, cities, states, and nations of the world, and cost over $1.1 million. Upon completion, it became the world's tallest structure, a title it held until 1889, when the Eiffel Tower was finished in Paris, France. The Korean War Veterans Memorial, located southeast of the Lincoln Memorial and just south of the reflecting pool on the National Mall, honors those Americans who answered the call, those who worked and fought under the most trying circumstances, and those who gave their lives for the cause of freedom. It was dedicated on July 27, 1995, on the 42nd anniversary of the armistice. As you approach the memorial, the first things you see are the 19 soldiers on patrol heading uphill. The use of juniper bushes in the field is to show the rugged terrain they met. Veterans who visit the memorial view the granite slabs located in front of each soldier as obstacles that American soldiers had to overcome. A low granite slab does not do justice to the many obstacles that they did have to overcome. The ponchos that each is wearing can only give you a hint as to the miserable weather they faced. The soldiers at the front of the patrol represent the first soldiers sent to the Korean Peninsula. The original design of the memorial was to have 38 statues representing the 38th parallel, but due to space limitations, the number of statues had to be cut in half. The highly polished surface of the wall of faces reflects all 19 soldiers, producing a total of 38 figures. When the wall is viewed from a distance, the faces form the outline of the rugged hills that are a dominant part of the Korean landscape. The images depicted on the wall were taken from actual photographs of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who participated in the conflict. If you look into the faces of the soldiers, you will notice that they represent all different races. Even though the United States had a very segregated society, the armed forces had begun to integrate units. Visitors to the memorial are so awestruck by the soldiers that before they know it, they have missed the other parts of the memorial. Along the north side of the memorial is a low stone wall on which are engraved the 22 countries that made up the United Nations forces in Korea. Not all the nations participated militarily. Several contributed much-needed medical supplies and personnel. These 22 nations felt strongly that their freedom was also being threatened, and they were willing to help in whatever way they could. All these elements lead toward the Pool of Remembrance, where the sacrifice of 54,246 American lives can be contemplated. Numbers of those killed, wounded, and missing in action are etched in stone nearby, and it is here where an inscription summarizes the true meaning of the memorial. Quote, "Our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met." The Pool of Remembrance is the most misunderstood part of the memorial. It was meant to be a place where visitors could sit in the shade of the trees and reflect upon what occurred almost 60 years ago. Unfortunately, the pool is viewed as some kind of a wishing well where coins are left behind. In actuality, the stilled water of the pool is part of the memorial that is for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedoms. Freedom is not free. The greatest achievement of the United States is that its people have remained free. The American flag has become recognized as the symbol of freedom around the world. Our freedom comes with a price, and from time to time, we will have to fight to defend the highest principle known to humanity, freedom. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial, completed in 1982, recognizes and honors the men and women who served in one of America's most divisive wars. The memorial is located adjacent to the National Mall. It was conceived and designed to make no political statement whatsoever about the highly controversial war, and it is a place where everyone, regardless of their opinion, can come together and remember and honor those who served. There are three components that comprise the memorial: the Wall of Names, the three servicemen statue and flagpole, and the Vietnam Women's Memorial. Set in the grassy park of Constitution Gardens, the wall is simple, thoughtful, and profound. Etched on black granite panels, it contains the names of the 58,249 men and women who were killed and remain missing from the Vietnam War. Name after name after name appears in a seemingly never-ending account. The names are listed in the order in which the men and women died or were declared missing. No name appears any more meaningful or important than any other. The names are distinguished only by how the men and women were lost. A diamond next to a name indicates a person was killed. A plus indicates a person is missing. The first name is located in the center of the memorial under the date 1959. They continue line by line down each panel as if each was a page in a book. The names resume at the left end of the memorial and continue toward the center. It is here, at the bottom of the wall, where the last death is recorded, next to the date 1975. The wall is built into the earth below ground level. The area within the wall's angle has been contoured to form a gentle slope approach towards the center of the wall. While entering the memorial at ground level from either end of its arms, the descent to the center reveals more and more of the wall until it towers more than 10 feet above the walkway. Like the Vietnam War itself, the controversy over the creation of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial divided America while inflicting deep wounds among the veterans. The proposed design for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial angered those who felt it did not convey the heroism, patriotism, and honor inherent in most war memorials. To them, placement of the memorial below ground hid it from view, while its color further hinted at a feeling of shame. The three servicemen statue, erected in the fall of 1984, was a compromise to that controversy. The statue captures a full range of emotions and, taken as a whole, symbolizes the spirit of compromise and reconciliation. A commemorative plaque honors those service members that died after the war, but as a direct result of injury suffered while in Vietnam, but that do not fall within the Department of Defense guidelines. The Vietnam Women's Memorial, designed by Glenna Goodacre, rounds out the memorial. This sculpture honors all women who served in Vietnam. It depicts three uniformed women with a wounded soldier. While one nurse comforts the soldier, another kneels in thought or prayer. The third looks to the skies for help from a medevac helicopter or perhaps from a higher power. Goodacre left the interpretation open so that people could read into it whatever they wished. Every day, family and friends of those on the wall and the general public visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, often leaving behind flowers and mementos in remembrance of their loved ones. The goal of the memorial was to afford all people a chance to reflect on the price of war and to honor those who served. Many people hopefully envisioned the memorial as a place where veterans could find closure, nicknaming it the Wall That Heals. Having the memorial built, in many cases, allowed veterans to reflect, to remember lost friends, and heal wounds. It puts a human face on what was America's longest war. The World War II Memorial, the newest monument on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., honors the 16 million who served in the armed forces of the United States, the more than 400,000 who died, and all who supported the war effort from home. Symbolic of the defining event of the 20th century, the memorial is a monument to the spirit, sacrifice, and commitment of the American people. It is located on the National Mall on the former site of the Rainbow Pool at the eastern end of the Reflecting Pool between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, and is the only 20th century event commemorated on the mall's central axis. It was dedicated by President George W. Bush on May 29, 2004, 2 days before Memorial Day. More than two-thirds of the memorial consists of plants and water. A circular garden called the Circle of Remembrance is enclosed by a 2-foot-high stone wall. One interesting thing to note is that outside the memorial there is an engraving. Kilroy was here, with a cartoon doodle, which was typical of the Kilroy graffiti associated with World War II servicemen who would draw the doodle on the walls or elsewhere wherever they were stationed, encamped, or visited. The memorial itself consists of 56 pillars. Each pillar is inscribed with the names of the then 48 United States states, the District of Columbia, the Alaska Territory, the Territory of Hawaii, the Commonwealth of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, arranged in a semicircle around a central plaza with two 43-foot arches on opposite sides. Each of the two arches is adorned with sculpted bronze wreaths and is inscribed with Atlantic and Pacific, representing the Atlantic and Pacific theaters of the war. Small fountains sit at the bases of the arches, and waterfalls surround the Freedom Wall, which sits on the west side of the memorial with a view of the Reflecting Pool and the Lincoln Memorial behind it. The wall contains 4,048 gold stars, each one representing approximately 100 American deaths occurred in the war. American founding father Thomas Jefferson's importance as one of the great figures of the nation's history demanded a memorial site of prominence in Washington, D.C., equal to that occupied by the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. In June of 1934, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt initiated the creation of such a monument honoring the third President of the United States. The neoclassical building reflects Jefferson's fascination with Roman architecture and is composed of marble steps, a dome, and a portico. The circular colonnaded structure is an adaptation of the classical style that Jefferson introduced into this country. Located in West Potomac Park on the shore of the tidal basin of the Potomac River, this open-air building is one of the main anchor points in the area of the National Mall. The Jefferson Memorial was officially dedicated on the 200th anniversary of his birth, April 13, 1943. At the time, it was met with wide criticism by modernists who felt that modeling the 20th century structure after Greek and Roman temples constituted a tired architectural lie. The cost of construction was slightly more than $3 million, and the memorial itself weighs approximately 32,000 tons. The 129-foot dome is 4 feet thick, and the interior of the memorial has a 19-foot-tall, 5-ton bronze statue of Jefferson, which was added 4 years after the dedication. The interior walls are engraved with passages from Jefferson's writings. Most prominent are the words which are inscribed around the monument near the roof, taken from a letter written to Dr. Benjamin Rush on September 23, 1800. I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility to every form of tyranny over the mind of man. In the years subsequent to this letter, Jefferson went on to serve as president from 1801 to 1809. During his presidency, such events as the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition took place. However, Jefferson will probably always be best known for being one of the most influential founding fathers and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, penning the following words: We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. We solemnly publish and declare that these colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. With his strong beliefs in the rights of man and a government derived from the people, in freedom of religion and in the separation of church and state, and in education available to all, Thomas Jefferson struck a chord for human liberty 200 years ago that has resounded through the decades. The last stop on our tour is the FDR Memorial, which is located near the Potomac River, in between the Jefferson and Lincoln memorials. Throughout the 12 years Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president, most Americans worried about their lives and well-being on a regular basis. During these 12 years, the American people went through two periods of extreme adversity, the Great Depression and World War II. It is only fitting that the man who led our nation through these trying times be remembered. The FDR Memorial honors not only the memory of this great president, but also reflects the era which he represents. The memorial was dedicated on May 2nd, 1997, and is spread over 7.5 acres in West Potomac Park. As visitors pass through, they catch a glimpse into the time of his presidency and are able to identify how he gave strength to the American people. It traces 12 years of United States history through a sequence of 4 outdoor rooms, one for each of FDR's terms in office. Near the entrance of the memorial is a statue of FDR seated in a wheelchair similar to the one he actually used. This element was added to the memorial later in January of 2001 after numerous outcries from people who thought the president's disability should be accurately represented. The first room represents a time of suffering, fear, and dim hope for the American people. In 1933, FDR began his first term while the United States was in the midst of the Great Depression. Approximately 30% of Americans were unemployed, with thousands losing their jobs every day. To make matters worse, in the middle and western parts of the country, there was a lack of rain for several years. Due to this drought, the land dried up and made it impossible for farmers to harvest their crops. Most of the country was without a source of income, and thousands of families were forced to leave their homes and live without adequate shelter, food, or clothing. These insufficient living conditions led to thousands of malnourished, diseased children and adults across the nation. From the days of his first presidential campaign during the Great Depression, Roosevelt spoke directly to the people. "I pledge you, I pledge myself," he said in his 1932 acceptance speech, "to a new deal for the American people." Many people were still working hard to make a living during Roosevelt's second term, but as visitors move through the second room, they are greeted with symbols of hope, like the bronze sculpture of a man listening intently to a radio. Throughout his presidency, he addressed America by radio in what came to be known as fireside chats. Each idea, each phrase was underscored by courage and optimism that inspired the people he served. Many of this generation may fondly remember these fireside chats and their importance to the average person during the Great Depression. Americans knew that FDR was working hard to help restore the country to a more stable economy. Upon entering the third room of the memorial, visitors leave the symbols of hope laid out in the second room and into the uncertainty of war. For FDR, this entire term would involve preventing world destruction. Visitors are initially greeted with a destructive presence as giant granite blocks are strewn across their path. FDR's feelings toward war are on the damaged wall. I have seen war. I have seen war on land and sea. I have seen blood running from the wounded. I have seen the dead in the mud. I have seen cities destroyed. I have seen children starving. I have seen the agony of mothers and wives. I hate war. As visitors walk through this room, they hear a roaring noise coming from a chaotic waterfall crashing over strewn, jagged boulders as if a massive explosion had occurred here. This is another symbol of the destruction of war. In his 1941 State of the Union address, as the nation contemplated the increasingly more inevitable prospect of being drawn into the war, President Roosevelt spelled out 4 freedoms as a reminder of what America must stand for. As visitors move into the 4th room, another term begins and a life ends. Imagine serving as the president of a country for 12 years. Now imagine those 12 years filled with challenging events, including a national depression and a world war. When FDR was elected to his 4th term, more terms than any other president, he began his 12th and final year as president. In April 1945, a few months after he was inaugurated for the 4th time, FDR suffered from a stroke and died at the age of 63. More than 50 years after Roosevelt's death, his own words call out from the walls of his memorial as if he were somehow present. Those who know FDR only as a historical figure recognize these words by their association with great and catastrophic events. For the many Americans who lived through the Roosevelt years, the words recall personal struggles and triumphs during the 12 years that seemed like a lifetime. Running water is an important physical and metaphoric component of the memorial. Each of the 4 rooms, representing Roosevelt's respective terms in office, contains a waterfall. As one moves from room to room, the waterfalls become larger and more complex, reflecting the increasing complexity of a presidency marked by the vast upheavals of economic depression and world war. In the first room, a single large drop represents the crash of the economy that led to the Great Depression. In the second, multiple stair-step drops represent the Tennessee Valley Authority dam building project. Chaotic falls at varying angles seen in the third room represent the onset of World War II. And finally, a still pool in the 4th room represents the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Although he was no longer president of the nation, his legacy continued to affect the country then as it does now, and will be forever remembered through this great memorial.